Masechet Ketubot Daf Chaf Vav. We've been discussing different actions that one does, and based on that, can we assume that the person is a valid Kohen or valid Levi? So now another braita along those lines. Tanya. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Keshem shetiruma chazaka likuna, kach maaser rishon chazaka lichuna, ve'acholek bebetin ena chazaka. So it's just like if someone receives teruma, then we assume that they are a valid kohen. So too, if someone receives maaser rishon, that's any produce, the farmer has to give 1/10 to a Levi. So if someone is receiving Maaser Rishon, then we can assume that they are a Kohen. Okay, this is curious. We would expect it to say that we would expect that the person is a Levi. Why do we think that they're a Kohen if they get Maaser Rishon? Gemara will explain. And the third thing is that someone who receives a share of Tirumah, Cholek, in Betin, that is not considered a Chazakah. Gemara will ask why, assuming the Betin is competent and they checked it out, and they would not award terumah to someone who is not a kohen. So why is this not a chazakah? All right, first question. Maaser rishon de levihu. Hold on, maaser rishon goes to a levi. So if someone receives maaser rishon, why would we presume that they are a kohen? And the answer is Kid Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Tanya Tirumah lekohen maaser rishon levi divrei Rabbi Akiva. We're going to follow the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah in the following braita, where it says, according to Rabbi Akiva, Tirumah goes to a kohen, maaser rishon only to a Levi. So that's Rabbi Akiva. So we're not talking about him. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer maaser rishon af lekohen. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, Kohanim, after all, are included in Leviim, right? Kohanim are also from the tribe of Levi, and so therefore Maaser Rishon can be given to a Kohen. So we're going to follow that. That if someone gets Maaser Rishon, we can assume they're a Kohen. Now, this still doesn't answer the question. Emud amar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah af lekohen ve'lo levi me'amar. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was only teaching that you can give Maaser Rishon also to a kohen, but he's not denying that you can give it to a Levi also. So therefore, there's no proof from here that the person is going to be a kohen just because they get Maaser Sheni. Could be a kohen, but it could also be a Levi. More likely, it's a Levi. And so we say, in Batad de Kansinhu Ezra. Actually, we're talking about after a knas of Ezra. As during the time of Ezra, he told all the Jews in Bavel, come on, let's go to Eretz Yisrael and build it up and support the community that's there. And the Leviim, only very few of them went from Bavel and made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. So because of that, Ezra instituted a penalty against the Leviim. Hey Leviim, you only should receive Maaser Rishon because that's payment for your service to the Bet HaMikdash, for the people. They were the teachers. They did a lot of important jobs. Well, if you're not coming to Eretz Yisrael and you're not doing your job, then you don't deserve to get Maaser Sheni, and therefore the Maaser Rishon, therefore was not given to the Leviim and was only given to the Kohanim, and therefore if someone gets Maaser Rishon, that is proof that they are a Kohen. Okay, now we ask, wait, but it could happen sometimes that even though there's a penalty, they shouldn't get it. Sometimes it might get into the hands of a Levi. We're not going to be as careful for Maaser Rishon than we would be for Tirumah. So is that really sufficient to make such a presumption? So Rav Chisda says, we're not talking about a regular case. In a regular case, you're right, even though there's a penalty, still, it's not 100%. Still, Leviim may happen sometimes that they get the Maaser Rishon. But rather, we're talking here about a case where there was a chazakah, that someone of this person, that his father is a kohen. Good. So we know he's not a Levi, he's a kohen, based on this chazakah. But then there's a rumor. Not just like any nonsense rumor, some kind of substantiated rumor, less than witnesses, but something, that his mother was his father had married a gerusha or a chalusa, and therefore this child is a halal. And they they gave him at the threshing floor Maaser Rishon, which means they checked him out and apparently he was fine. So if he was a ben Girusha, ben Chalutza, then that person is like a Yisrael and would not be able to get not Teruma, not even Maaser Rishon. So it's based on that. They used it to counteract a rumor. So that's how we know. So here's the considerations. Levi, delav Leviuhu. We don't have to worry that he's should we worry that he's a Levi? We know he's not a Levi because we have a chazakah that his father is a Kohen. Good. So Ma'ikal Memar, ben Girusha, ben Chalusa. Now what are you worried about? This rumor that maybe his father married a Girusha or Chalusa. Lami baya lemanda mar maaser rishon asur lezarim delahavu yahavele. There is a machloket about this. For sure, according to the opinion that says that we do not give that maaser rishon is prohibited to a non-Kohen, non-Levi, then for sure at the threshing floor they would say, oh, we have this rumor, we're not going to give it to you. So if they gave it to him, it means that that rumor is not true. So then for sure that giving him Maaser Rishon would be a proof that he is a Kohen. There's another opinion that says Maaser Rishon is permitted even to people who are not a Levi and not a Kohen. Why? Because even though the farmer has an obligation to give it to a Levi because it has monetary value, the monetary value belongs to a Levi, but it has no kedusha in and of itself like terumah does. And therefore, if the Levi wants to share it with Israel, Israel can eat it. Or like what we do nowadays is, since a Levi, we're not sure whose lineage is what, so therefore we do separate, farmers in Israel will separate the Maaser Rishon, and then they'll say, hey, if anyone can prove that they have a family tree, that they're really a true Levi, then they can come and take it. Otherwise, and then the farmer just eats it or sells it, and so there's no prohibition for Azar to eat it. So even according to that opinion, according to that, maybe they're giving it out. How do you know that's a proof that the person is a Kohen? That's only true in terms of a Yisrael eating it, should a Kohen or Levi decide to share it with them. That's permitted. But in terms of official distribution that would happen at the threshing floor, no. The Yisrael cannot be on that list and cannot receive it from the distribution floor. And therefore, if we see that someone did get Maaser Rishon at the threshing floor, then, and we know also that they're not a Levi, then for sure that means that they are a proper Kohen. All right, so that we understand that section of the Braita of why if someone gets Maaser Rishon, in what case we assume that they are a Kohen. And now we're going to get to the last section of the Braita. Someone who gets a distribution of Tirumah in a Bet Din, that's not a presumption of their good Kohen status. If in Bet Din it's not a Chazakah, then where would it be a Chazakah? The Bet Din, that's the highest level. They're going to make sure it's a competent Bet Din. So what's the problem here? Avshad explains it's talking about a case of inheritance. A father who is a Kohen dies, and he has some terumah, and so the Bet Din, they come to the Bet Din, and the Bet Din distributes the inheritance among a number of sons. So that's fine. Now, just because one of the sons, or each of the sons gets some terumah, doesn't mean that they're necessarily kosher. It could be one son is a kosher Kohen and can eat it, and another son may be a halal, and while he can't, so therefore he receives it because it has monetary value. He could sell it, but he cannot eat it because he's a halal. Okay, now we ask, Peshita, wouldn't that be obvious that if Bet Din gives it as an inheritance, that's not a chazakah? Oh no, it's not obvious. We would have thought that since the Bet Din gives it to one of the sons, and that son can eat it, then we can assume that the Bet Din gave it to the other son also in the same way, with the same terms, that the other son can eat it. That means both sons are not halalim. But that's not true. It could be that the Bet Din will award it to one son, says you have full rights, you can eat it, and the other son says, hey, you're a halal, you cannot eat it, but you can sell it. And that would be the case that the Baraita is talking about. All right, good. Now we go all the way back to the Mishnah, which had a number of different opinions about whether you can trust one witness to say that someone is a proper Kohen. Rabbi Yehuda Omer and Ma'alin Nechuna Pia Dechad. Rabbi Yehuda said, no, you can't. But we're going to be discussing the other two opinions there. Rabbi Elazar says, yes, you can trust one witness as long as there is no challenger. Right? No one challenges it, then that's fine. Now, what does a challenge mean? Presumably, it would be a challenge of two witnesses that say he's not a good Kohen, so then one Kohen forget about. But if there's nobody, then it's okay. But then we have Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says you can use one witness to say someone is a good Kohen, and that's he leaves it at that and doesn't say anything about a challenger. Sounds like even with a challenger, Rashbag would say it's okay. So Rashbag is more lenient in this regard. Now we're going to ask. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Hainu Rabbi Eliezer, aren't they the same? They both say you can trust one witness. Now, what kind of challenge are you talking about? If it's a challenge of two witnesses, then presumably nobody would say that one witness can stand up to two witnesses. So maybe the difference between them is when the challenger is one witness. So you have one witness that says this guy's a good Kohen, and then one witness says no, he's a problematic Kohen. And there, the Rabbi Eliezer Sabat Ad Had, Rabbi Eliezer would say, we take into account the one challenger, and that knocks out the one witness for him. Rashbag Sabat Ad Tereh. And Rashbag says, no, if you want to challenge one witness, you need two witnesses against him. But one against one, we would emphasize the positive witness and say he's okay. So maybe that's the machloket. Rabbi Yochanan explained this Mishnah and says, according to everyone, when you say a challenge is no less than two. Meaning one challenger, we're going to kick out according to both Rabbi Eliezer and Rashbag. So when they were back to square one, they seem to be saying the same thing, that one witness is good, and even good against one, just not against two. So, rather, what we're talking about, another case altogether, like we had above, we have a certain chai who is a chazakah, that he is a kohen. Fine. He's good. He's a proper kohen. We know that his father was a kohen, so he's a kohen. But then there's a rumor that there's something wrong, that he's a halal. But it's just a rumor. But based on that rumor, we downgraded him and said, no, sorry, you can't get the benefits of being a Kohen. But then one witness comes and says, no, he's good, he's a proper Kohen. So based on one witness is stronger than a rumor. And then the Bet Din brought him back up and allowed him to be a good Kohen. But then two witnesses come and say he's a halal, and now we downgrade him. But then one more witness comes and says he's a good Kohen. And everyone would agree that two separate witnesses can join together for testimony. And so therefore, the last witness that comes on his behalf joins up with the previous one witness that also testified on his behalf, and they create two witnesses that say he's a good Kohen, and they will outweigh the two witnesses that say he's not a good Kohen. That's the case that the Mishnah is talking about, where there will be a machloket. So what's the machloket about then? And they're disagreeing about how much do we have to worry about the downgrading or contempt of the court. If the court keeps flip-flopping, right, then people are going to say, what kind of crazy court is this? And they're going to cause people to have disrespect for the court. So do we worry about that and don't flip-flop, or just do the right thing, right? What the evidence says as it comes in. So Tana Kama Savar Kevan de Achtine Lama Sikinan le Chashinan le Ziluta de Bedina. He says once two witnesses came and you downgraded him. That was already, we downgraded for the second time, right? Because there was a rumor, downgraded, then one witness upgraded, then two witnesses downgraded again. What are you going to do now? One more witness comes, you're going to upgrade again? People are going to make fun of the court. So you know what? Leave him downgraded, even though it's a little unfair to him. It's true, because there is one witness that supports and joins together with the other witness. Nevertheless, for the greater good, it's more important that people respect the office of the Beit Din than to help out this one person who already went back and forth so many times. That's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who says we're going to believe one witness, but not against a challenge of two witnesses. Even if one more witness comes after, we leave him downgraded. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel savar anan achtinane v'anan masikinane ve'leziluta de bedina lo hashinan. Says no, we'll downgrade him, we'll elevate him, even if it happens 2-3 times. That's it. We do what's right, and we don't have to worry about the people disrespecting the court, right? Maybe the opposite. They'll say, oh, so look how the court, they do what's right, even if they have to change. It might be the opposite if the court people find out that the court left him downgraded, even though they had evidence that he should be okay. Maybe that would lead to disrespect of the court. Okay, so that's the essence of their machloket, according to this answer. But we're going to reject this answer. Matkif ladav ashe. Afilu tre utre name. Says if that's the case, then even if it was 2 and 2, meaning even if 2 witnesses came and said he's no good, and after that 2 witnesses came and said he's good, so then the same problem would apply according to the Eliezer. You'd say, are you going to flip-flop? And people are going to disrespect it and leave him downgraded. But would he say that? No way, right? Even the Eliezer would agree that if 2 witnesses come and say he's kosher at the end, then you're going to bring him back. And so therefore, it doesn't, or maybe he would agree, but if he would agree, then he should say that and say it's even talking about 2 witnesses coming at the end. But he only says it's talking about a case of 1 witness. So why limit it to a case of 1 witness if he would have said the same law in terms of 2 witnesses coming after? So rather we reject that. It has to be a case of one when there's 1 witness comes before and says he's good, 2 witnesses say he's bad, and then 1 more witness says he's good. That's the case that they argue, because they're arguing about whether 2 witnesses can join together when they come separately. We have actually a 3-way machloket about this in the Baraita de Tanya. En aedutan mistarefet ad shir'u shenehem ke'achat. Tanakama says 2 witnesses have to see an event together at the same time. They have to be there seeing it together. If one person sees, the beginning of a murder and then leaves, and second person sees the end of the murder, and but they weren't there together, they can't testify because they didn't see the same event at the same time. Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha Omar afilu b'zeh achar zeh. Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha says it's fine, even if one sees at one point and one sees the end, that is also fine. They can still join together. Ve'en eduta mitkayemet bebeit din ad sheya'idu shenehen ke'achad. Now, so that machloket was about the testimony, seeing the event, whether they have to be together or not. But now there's also a machloket regarding when they come to Beit Din, that they have to come to Beit Din together. Whatever they saw, they have to come to Beit Din together and testify together. Otherwise, it's no good. But Rabbi Natan Omer, Shom'in devarav shel zeh hayom, uchshevo chavero lemachar shom'in lo. Says no, 1 witness can testify now, and another witness can come and testify tomorrow. And we, the Beit Din, we will put them together afterwards. Okay, so Rabbi Eliezer would follow the opinion of Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha and say that the witness that came first and said that they are good cannot join with the 1 witness that comes after the 2 witnesses and says he's good, even though they're both saying that he's a kosher, but one came yesterday and one came today. They testified separately, and the 2 witnesses that said he's no good were in between. Therefore, you cannot join them together, as Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha said, and since you cannot join them together, you only have one witness and two separate one witnesses that say the Kohen is good, and two witnesses together that said is bad. And that's why we leave him downgraded. Whereas, according to Rashbag, he would follow the opinion of Rabbi Natan over here and say that you can join together witnesses even though they come at separate times. And therefore, when one witness says he's good, two witnesses says he's bad, and then one witness comes and says he's good, we can join the two good witnesses and bring him back up. And so that, according to this, you see why it has to be a case where there's one witness that comes at the end. Only then there would be a machloket. But if it was two witnesses that came together at the end, then everyone would agree that that is totally fine, and we would upgrade that Kohen again. And we now go on to the next Mishnah. We have plenty of time to finish this Mishnah also, even though it goes into the next daf. We learn Ha'isha shenechbesha bidei goyim. Aide mamon muteret leba'ala. Aide nefashot asura leba'ala. If a woman was imprisoned by non-Jews, well, so what happens in prison? Can we assume that she was safe, or was she violated? And if she was violated, then she would be prohibited to go back to her husband if he were a Kohen. Even if it was against her will, a Kohen cannot be with her. So here we say it depends. If she was imprisoned because of monetary matters, she didn't pay or her husband didn't pay some debt, and they took her to prison, a debtor's prison, then it's permitted, because there they just want the person to pay, and then the person will pay and they give the person back. Whereas if they violate the wife of this person, then the husband will be even angrier and not pay it and lead to bigger problems. So if it's just monetary, then it's less serious and they will protect the woman. But if there's some kind of capital case involved, it's not clear here. Is it the woman who was arrested for a capital punishment by non-Jews? In that case, they're going to kill her anyway. So we have to suspect that they violate. So even if she somehow goes free, she can't be with her husband who's a Kohen. Or the Gemara is going to explain that's actually talking about the husband who was arrested for a capital punishment, for being a murderer or something, and then also the wife got involved and she would be arrested. She was arrested also, or she was not protected. But then we also have to worry that she was violated. Okay, Rashi here says that she's the one that was arrested for capital punishment. Then we assume that she was violated and she cannot go back to her husband. All right, that's the Mishnah. Amar Rav Shemuel bar Rav Yitzchak Amar Rav lo shanu ella sheyad Yisrael tekefa al umot ha'olam aval yad umot ha'olam tekefa al asman afilu al yedei mamon asura leba'ala. So Rav says this distinction between a monetary and a capital case is only true when the hand of Israel is dominant on the nations of the world, when Israel has its autonomy and is strong and even has other citizens under it. Then we can assume that the non-Jews who arrested her will be careful and protect the woman in a monetary case and would be permitted. That would be true. Like in Israel today, even if a woman was imprisoned by the Palestinian Authority, for example, and they would be careful because they know that Israel is above them. But if nations of the world are dominant over themselves, euphemism, meaning if the nations of the world are dominant over Israel, as it is for most of history, then even if it's a monetary case, they don't care. They're not going to protect the woman, even though it's only for a small monetary thing, and we have to assume that she was violated and she would not be able to go back to her husband if he's a Kohen. That's a Rav's statement. Now we challenge the Rav's statement from a Mishnah in Aiduyot. Mativ Rava. Ha'id Rabbi Yoseh HaKohen Rabbi Zechariah ben Akasav. So Eduyot is all about testimonies of rabbis who heard traditions about different cases. And so these two sages testify about the following case. Albat Yisrael Shehur Hana be'Ashkelon. There was a Jewish woman who was taken as collateral in Ashkelon, Hud Hana. So the Hud Hana we're going to see is a little bit different from being arrested and put in debtor's prison. Hud Hana is actually a collateral where, let's say the husband owes someone money and he could give collateral. He could give land, he could give some jewelry. Man, if I don't pay it back, then you keep that jewelry. In this case, he gives his wife as collateral. If I pay you back, I get my wife back. If I don't pay you back, you keep my wife and you can do what you want with her. So that's the case we're talking about. It was Hud Hana and it was in Ashkelon, and we'll see why that's significant. And then she was married to a Kohen, and even though she was freed after, but the family kept away from her and said, sorry, we assume no fault of her own. But nevertheless, they said, we assume you were violated and you can't be with this Kohen. והעדה מעידין אותה שלא נסתרה ושלא נטמעה. ואמרו להם חכמים, אם אתם מאמינים שהוא הנה, האמינו לה שלא נסתרה ושלא נטמעה. ומי אתם מאמינים שלא נסתרה ושלא נטמעה, אל תאמינו שהוא הנה. She had witnesses, however, as that said that she was never secluded and she was not violated. And when the Chachamim heard those witnesses, they told the family, you're doing the wrong thing. If you believe that she was, in fact, taken as collateral, then also you believe those witnesses, then believe these witnesses that say that she was not violated. And if you don't believe that she was not violated, then don't believe that she was taken collateral at all. And in other words, either way, she is permitted. And so don't be a double standard. We believe the witnesses that say she's no good and not the witnesses that say she is good. Okay, that is the story that's told in Mishnah in Eduyot. Here's the question. Ashkelon is a place where the non-Jewish authorities are dominant over the Jews. It's not a case where the Jews have autonomy. They do not have autonomy in that city. And so therefore, according to Rav, even in a monetary case, we should not permit the woman to come back. And so, v'ketane hahud hena'in nechbesha lo. But here it sounds like the problem was that she was hud hena. She was taken as collateral. Taken as collateral, in that case, we assume that they're going to violate her. But what if she was only arrested in a regular debtor's prison where there isn't? So that it sounds like in that case, we would not need the witnesses, right? In this case, the family separated from her, but the rabbi said, no, there's witnesses that are okay. If there weren't witnesses, then it would be a problem. Why would it be a problem? Because she was taken as collateral. But if it was not taken as collateral, if it was just as she was taken for the debt, and as a debtor's prison, then we would not need witnesses, and she would be permitted for sure, even without witnesses. Hold on, that's a question. This is in a place where the non-Jews are dominant, and Rav, you just said when the non-Jews are dominant, then even in a monetary case, you would assume that she has been violated. So the answer is, no, in fact, even if she was only imprisoned, she still would be presumed to be violated. And she would need witnesses. It just happens to be that the case in that they remembered, that they testified about, was a real case. Happened to be that case is when Hud Hena, when she was taken as collateral. But indeed, the same would be true if she was not taken as collateral, if it was a simple monetary case. Okay, so we resolve it. This discussion that we just had from the Mishnah and the explanation is retold in two more different versions, but they all come to the same conclusion. In this version, Rava is not challenging Rav's statement, but rather bringing a braita as proof. And we're going to say, no, it's not necessarily a proof. And we quote the whole Mishnah. Same exact thing. They testified that this woman was taken as a collateral, and the family separated from her because they assumed that she was violated. But she has witnesses that she was not violated. The same Mishnah, the rabbi said, you should trust those witnesses, and you should allow her back into the family. Now, here's the proof that Rava is going to try to bring. V'Ashkelon da'ayideh mamon hava. Now, so Ashkelon, this case, was about monetary things. And the only reason that the rabbi said she can go back to her husband is because she has witnesses. But otherwise, it would not. Otherwise, we would not permit it. Even though it's a monetary case, we would assume that she is violated. And right now, we're assuming that there's no difference between given as collateral and just imprisoned in debtor's prison. And so, if there's no distinction between those two, you see that why does she need witnesses? Without witnesses, we assume she's violated. It must be because Ashkelon is a place where the non-Jews are dominant, and so you see Rav's statement is supported. And we answer, Lo hudhana shaneh. No, maybe not. Giving a collateral, giving a wife as collateral, that's different. In that case, they say, oh, see, we're going to be able to keep her. He gave us permission. The husband gives us permission. So then they'd be more likely to violate her than a simple case of monetary. So it's not a proof, not a disproof either. Third version that also comes to the same conclusion. Ika derame la mirma. Some present it as a contradiction between two equal sources. Tanan. Our Mishnah said that if a woman is in prison only because of money, she is permitted to go back to her husband even if he's a Kohen. And this time we don't quote the whole Mishnah, but rather we just bring the snippets of it, that this case of Ashkelon was money, and the only reason the rabbi said they can go back is because there are witnesses. But if not, if there are no witnesses, she could not go back. We have a contradiction. Mishnah says money case, she can go back to her husband. In this case, a money case, she cannot go back to her husband without witnesses. And the answer, Mishaneh, Amar Rav Shemuel Bar Rav Yitzchak, Lo Kashya, La Kashya. Kan sheyad Yisrael tekefa al mot haolam, kan sheyad mot haolam tekefa al atzman. And so, Rav Shemuel Bar Yitzchak gives the answer and says, no, there's no question, no problem here. Here we're talking about when Israel is ascendant, is dominant. That's what the Mishnah is talking about. When Israel is ascendant, then we can assume that if it's only for a monetary thing, they would be okay with it. That's what the Mishnah is talking about, our Mishnah. Whereas the other Mishnah that says that unless they had to have witnesses, otherwise no, that's when the non-Jews are dominant, and that's why we cannot trust, even though it's just a monetary case, we cannot trust that she was protected unless there are, in fact, witnesses there. All right, and that's the last section to complete the discussion of that Mishnah that says, Al yedeh nefashot asura. If a woman is in prison because of capital offense, then we assume that they did not protect her and she was violated. She can't go back to her husband who's a Kohen. So what exact case are we talking about? Amarav kegon neshe, a wife of thieves. Thieves in the Roman Empire were often hanged. And therefore, that is even they were killed. And even if it's just for that, their wives might also be arrested for collusion. They knew about it, and their wives would be in any case mistreated. And therefore, even if they somehow got off the hook and were freed, if he's a Kohen, the wife is prohibited to him. We assume that they were violated. That's enough. Levi amar kigon ishto shel ben donai. Levi says, no, if he's just a thief, then that would not be sufficient. Only if he was someone like Ben Donai. Ben Donai was is mentioned in Mishnah in Sotah, and he's also mentioned in Josephus. And he was a pretty rough guy. He was known as being part of a gang of robbers and murderers. So he was a murderer as well. He was also a zealot against the Romans. And he went around and did this for 20 years until he was finally caught and killed. So it's a guy like that, when he is imprisoned for capital punishment, then his wife would also either be imprisoned as well, or abandoned and given over to anyone to do what they wish. And therefore, we have to assume that she was violated. And if in a case like that, somehow they got out of prison, he would be prohibited to her if he was a Kohen. Okay, so you see, according to the explanations here, we're not talking about when she is guilty of capital punishment, but rather when her husband is. But she is she also suffers consequences on account of that. Amar Chizkiah, says this is only true if they already made a sentence of death. In other words, after the death sentence, then everybody knows that's it. He's gone. He's not going to protect his wife, and therefore they can go and violate her. But before that, she's not sentenced. That maybe he'll be innocent, and so they would protect her before that. That's Chizkiah. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Even before the sentencing, most people don't get off the hook, and even before that, people will be. People may very well assume that he's going to die, and therefore their wives would be violated even before the sentencing. Baruch Adonai L'olam, Amen v'Amen.